Hi, everyone. This is Laura McSpadden Walker again with Positive Force Movement. In honor of the recently passed International Pronouns Day, I'm going to share, for those who don't know, that my correct gender pronouns are they, them. Today, I'm going to continue my series of videos that can help our bodies heal from and adapt to the physical stressors of protesting. Today, I'm going to focus a lot on movements that are good for preventing lower back pain, which is common for people whether or not they're protesting, but in particular, if you're doing long hours of marching, if you're sitting on the ground, all of those things, if you're getting arrested and dealing with all of the physical stressors of that go along with that, having some good resilience to your lower back is really helpful. Before I dive in with the movements, I'm going to, as always, preface this with a few things. For one thing, if you are eligible to vote, I strongly recommend that you do. Obviously, that's not the be-all, end-all of social change, but it is one small part that hopefully, if we end up with less fascist leadership, doing some of the organizing and community protests and radical social change work is going to be less dangerous to those who are involved in this cause. I also encourage you all, wherever you're watching this, to advocate for the release and dropped charges of anyone who's been arrested in Black Lives Matter protests. And of course, for the arrest and prosecution of any officers who are involved in the murder of Black folks. Along with that is advocating for the defunding of police and the refunding of communities, and that you do all that you can as individuals to support your local organizers and your local Black-owned businesses. With that said, now I'm going to dive in a bit to some of the movements to help, again, prevent and recover from lower back pain. Some of these you may feel stretching through your back and so on and so forth. Some of these you may not, and that is intentional. Oftentimes, low back pain is also connected to the front of your torso not being fully involved and or your glutes not being fully engaged or as strong as possible. When your glutes and your abberdabbers are supporting your torso and involved in your movement, less strain is going to go to your lower back. So if some of these are like, I don't see what the heck this has to do with my back, trust. Everything in the body is connected. All of the ones I'm going to talk about today are done on a horizontal surface. That could be your floor. That could be your bed. It could be whatever horizontal surface you have that's comfortable for you to be on. I'm going to do some follow-ups with additional back pain prevention that can be done in different positions, like some chair-based ones and such. But for today, we're going to keep it simple. It's all going to be ground-based. So go ahead and find a comfortable spot on a horizontal surface. We are going to start on our backs with our knees bent and our feet on the ground. Oh, another important thing to preface this with. You have full and complete body autonomy. If any of these don't feel good to you, don't do them. If any of these hurt, don't do them. You don't have to do all of these. The goal is through all of these to help each person watching find a couple that seem to be helpful for them. And that doesn't have to be every single one. Your body knows what your body needs. So for this first one, what I'm going to encourage you to do is first press your lower back against the ground. That's going to engage the abberdabbers. It's going to very slightly tuck the tailbone up. While maintaining that, lift your knees. Pause. You can take a breath. And lower. Now, if that's too much, you don't have to do this both legs at a time. Press the low back against the ground. Tailbone comes up a little bit. Lift one leg. Pause. and lower. And then, of course, with the other leg, press the low back down, tailbone comes up, abradabbers are kicked on, lift the leg, breathe. And again, if you feel inclined to do this with both legs, low back press down. Do that every rep. Make sure that the low back is pressed down, tailbone curls up a bit, actively lift both knees, take a breath. And lower. You can do however many of those feel right for your physical self. You're the boss. A similar but different variation of that are dead bug variations. Not a very lighthearted name for a movement, but it's the starting position is with both hands and both legs up. We'll go over some variations. You can do this with straight limbs or bent limbs. Let's start with bent limbs. Same start to this. Press the low back down, tailbone comes up a bit, abradabbers are engaged, and you can do any of the following variations. You can maintain that low back against the ground while tapping just one hand and then the other against the ground. That's going to change your center of gravity a bit, which forces some extra engagement through the torso. You can do just heel taps as such. You can do both hands and feet going opposite side arm and leg. So as my left leg goes down, my right hand taps. As always, don't forget to breathe. And you can do any of those variations with the knees and elbows extended instead. This increases the leverage point, so that increases the difficulty. So again, low back pressed against the ground, tailbone barely up. And you can do this just arms while maintaining this position. You can do just legs. Or you can do opposite side arm and leg. And release. Find whichever variation works for you. That's going to really help balance the muscular engagement between the front of your torso and the back to put less strain on your back and to make sure the front is really helping support and stabilize the spine. And now let's actually just take a moment and just breathe and notice your breathing. If you want to have your knees go side to side, take a breath with them over towards the left, over to the other side. Take a breath with them over here. Wonderful. So some of you watching this may have a past context with yoga. If so, you may be familiar with the happy baby pose. If not, don't worry, we're going to talk about it. Happy baby pose is a position where both legs are raised. If it's accessible, fingers are looped through the big toes, and that enables the knees to kind of move down to either side. You can use a yoga strap or a belt for this if your hands won't reach your toes. Also, if you can get into this position where both feet are raised and the knees are kind of out to the side without having to hold on to the toes. Again, your body knows what your body needs. But yes, in the traditional yoga position, it would involve fingers looped through toes. And you can hang out here and breathe. This provides some wonderful stretch along the lower back. Deep diaphragmatic breaths in and out through the nose are going to really be maximally beneficial here if that's something that your lungs and respiratory system will allow. You can then, from here, take this and add a little bit of side-to-side rocking. It can feel very nice on the lower back. Some people like to access this by extending the leg of the side you're going to. And then another wonderful way of really engaging the muscles all around the torso is being in this general position, not worrying about holding onto your feet, pressing the low back against the ground, tailbone barely up, and in this position doing nothing but focus on good deep diaphragmatic breaths where your belly really rises and expands on your inhalation and moves towards center on your exhalation. So let's take a few breaths here just so you can see how much muscular involvement this can invite. Wonderful. And you can lower your feet. So now at this point, we've done a lot that really kicks on kind of the anterior core, the front of the torso, the aberdabbers. We're going to do a little bit, like I said, to really focus on engaging the glutes. A lot of folks in present day society have what is actually referred to as gluteal amnesia, which is difficulty engaging the glutes, and instead the quads and hamstrings having a tendency to take over. So when I coach the hip bridge, I encourage people to have their range of motion be entirely determined by how far you can access this movement, with the majority of the sensation being in your glutes. So that's going to be key here. Some ways that I found help make that happen is making sure that all or most of the weight is in your heels instead of your toes. I will oftentimes even do these with just my heels in contact with the ground, or if my whole foot's down, making sure that I'm driving through the heels. We're going to start with tucking the tailbone, so that's tightening the aberdabbers. And then from here, with the tailbone tucked, aberdabbers engaged, squeezing the glutes. I've heard the cue and I've used the cue. It's somewhat crude. Cracking a walnut between your butt cheeks. So your tailbone's tucked, abs are tight. You're going to crack that walnut. And again, your range of motion is going to be determined by how high up you can get with more sensation in your glutes than in your quads or your hamstrings. So I would much rather someone do this and just get barely to here, but really be feeling the glute engagement, than be going all the way up and getting amazing range of motion, but having this be much more quad dominant. That's not what we're going for here. So tuck, tight, squeeze, and release. Excellent. Again, you're in charge of how many of these you do. Explore it on your own time. Yay. What I have on the list next is one of my favorite things to do. It feels so good to me. What you're going to do is you're going to lay on your back. One leg is going to be extended. The other leg, the knee can either be bent or extended. You'll see we're going to explore some with both. You're going to move this leg across your midline. And that's it. You can glide in and out of this and have this be very fluid. Or you can cross the midline and have it out to whatever your range of motion is and have it hang out there. You can explore knee flexion and extension. You can extend it to different heights. So reaching down there, reaching up here. Doing your best to keep both shoulders in contact with the ground. But again, if you find a really good stretch that's only accessible if the shoulder of the same side as the leg comes up a little bit, trust your body. But start by seeing how far you can go with both shoulders in contact with the ground. And of course, you'll end up doing this with both legs. And you might notice some significant asymmetry side to side. That's totally normal. What I recommend for those who do is start on the side that's more restricted, then do the side that's less restricted, and then do the side that's more restricted a second time. And what that's going to do is help your body move towards greater symmetry and mobility. So that's the cross-body stretch. I'm a huge fan. From here, we're going to stay on the horizontal surface, but we're going to transition to a quadruped position. If this is too much on your knees, you can take a blanket or pillow and put it not right under your knees, but actually under your shins. And that makes it so that your knees aren't actually going to be having any pressure on them from the ground below them. If that's not necessarily, that's a-okay, but this is a great option for people who have knee sensitivity for pressure on the ground. What I'm going to invite you to do here is rock back towards your heels, put one arm in the small of your back, and be resting on the forearm of the other arm. And your visualization here is going to be rotating the shoulder of the arm that's in the small of your back up towards the ceiling. You may not get a huge amount of motion, but this is really wonderful at stretching the muscles that run all along the vertebrae. And then, of course, you'll do this to the other side. Perfect. Now, from here, we're going to do a similar movement to what we did in the dead bug, but in this position instead of on our backs. And when you do it in this position, it's called the bird dog. Most of the same variations apply. What we're going to do is you can start by just reaching out one arm and then the other. If this is too much pressure on your wrists, do it on your forearms. It's going to be a little bit different stretch, but do what you need to do to move pain-free. Then, of course, you can also do this legs only, reaching out a leg, working on keeping the pelvis level, so not like doing like any of this, and not like reaching up. You're kicking straight back, pressing the heel away from the hips. I'm doing that with the other leg. And then just like with the dead bug, you can also do this opposite side arm and leg. Hang out, take a breath. Opposite side arm and leg. Hang out, take a breath. And again, as many of those as feel helpful. From here, something that might be intuitively something your body wants to do, rock back towards the heels, let the spine stay long. You can rock in and out of that. Now, if you tend to store some extra tension through your neck and shoulders, keeping the gaze ahead can provide a lovely strengthening sensation as well. Another one that anyone who's done yoga is going to be familiar with is cat-cow. I like to encourage, when introducing cat-cow, to imagine both the spinal flexion and extension being initiated by the tailbone. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to bring the tailbone up, allow that wave to go up the spine. Then the tailbone tucks, that wave goes up the spine until tailbone's down and head's down. Tuck the tailbone, gradually going into spinal extension all the way up. Tuck the tailbone, gradually going into spinal flexion all the way up. Doing it slowly and intentionally like this helps make sure that you aren't just rushing past the parts of your spine that are the most restricted. And then from here, we're going to do some wide knees rocking. So bringing the knees out further left to right, coming onto your forearms, gaze ahead at the wall in front of you, and rocking in and out of this position. And now we'll come back to our backs, getting into a nice comfortable position. Your knees can be bent and feet on the ground or extended, whichever feels best to you. And what I'm going to encourage us to finish up with is breathing. When we think about diaphragmatic breathing, people often think about the movement of the belly to the front. Optimally, it's going to be 360 degrees all the way around. So I'm going to encourage you to put your tongues on the top of your mouth behind your front teeth. Deep breaths in and out through the nose. Picturing the breath filling your lungs the way water fills a pitcher from the bottom up. And while doing that, on your inhalation, trying to feel your torso expanding, not just up, but also down towards the ground. And on your exhalation, feeling all of those points move towards your center. So inhaling, exhaling. Really allow that breath to increase that contact of the lower back against the ground. It's going to provide some wonderful stretching sensations. And as always, do as many of those as feel good to your physical self. When you are done with those deep, wonderful breaths, please feel free to follow us on Facebook. We're the Positive Force Movement. And thank you all for tuning in. Bye.